How is EU enlargement policy an example of soft power?
Well, I think the enlargement policy is a very strong example of soft power, in the sense that it's a policy which has driven fundamentally important reforms in the beneficiary countries up to the change of societal model, turning those countries into liberal democracies, changing the nature of their economic environment. All this by the force of influence and the attraction power of the European Union, without any coercion whatsoever, but based on a voluntary process. The countries apply and ask to become members, and then they accept to abide by the rules. So by dictating the rules, the European Union is just exercising influence on fundamentally deep reforms.
Is the EU's influence in the process of the Western Balkans as strong as during the previous enlargement?
The situation in the Western Balkans is quite different from the situation in the Central and Eastern European countries that were part of the wave of enlargement in 2004. The states come from a war situation. Their societies are quite divided, so the situation is diverse. At the same time, while the European perspective of the region has been reiterated many times towards this region, that they do belong to the European Union, they have a European perspective. Nevertheless, the influence of the European Union is somewhere lesser, in the sense that the progress is very long, because the reforms are extremely important. So there is a kind of patience notion that lowers the influence because the countries tend to be impatient. But for the rest, it's all equal in substance, but it's a question of perception.
What lessons has the EU learned from the first wave of accession, and how has its approach changed with the Western Balkans?
After the big enlargement of 2004, of course, we looked at what worked in the process and what maybe could have worked better. And we realized that the most difficult reforms, the ones touching to the basics of democracy, of protection of fundamental rights and fundamental values, were the ones that were addressed last in the process, because they are the most difficult. So one of the major changes is what we call now the fundamental first approach. We decided to start the enlargement process by pushing on those reforms for democracy, rule of law, good governance, public administration reforms, because we know those reforms are lengthy and they demand a lot of political will. So we put sort of conditionalities that the rest of the process is conditional by the country first engaging into those most difficult reforms.